Regular viewers of Outsiders will, of course, remember that it was on this show back in March 2018 and in the Spectator Australia magazine at the same time that David Adler, the head of the Australian Jewish Association, and specky writer Andrew L. Urban brought to your attention the fact that Australian taxpayers' money, your dollars, were being used to reward Palestinian terrorists for murdering Jews in Israel. To quote David Adler's article, quote, "Convicted terrorists in prison can receive 12,000 shekels per month, plus bonuses of 300 shekels per wife, 50 shekels per child. This can amount to around $3,500 US per month. By contrast, a teacher employed by the Palestinian Authority receives roughly $600 a month. The US, among other nations, was convinced some of this money was coming through the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA, and were cutting their support to that organization. As a direct consequence of the lobbying by David Adler, by Outsiders, by Pauline Hanson and others, we had a major victory in the Australian Parliament, and the then Foreign Minister, Julie Bishop, agreed to slash Australian funding to UNRWA by $10 million. We repeatedly applauded her for that decision on this show, as well as urging her to go further and slash the rest. So you can imagine my horror at hearing the news last week that Penny Wong and the Australian Labor government sneakily announced that they have doubled funding of UNRWA from $10 million to $20 million annually. In other words, they have completely reversed what we had achieved. Let me be crystal clear here. Knowing full well the repeated and acknowledged concerns here and around the world that taxpayers' money, and yes, Australian taxpayers' money, your money, was being used to pay for terrorists to murder innocent people. Knowing all that, Penny Wong and Anthony Albanese reversed the decision to cut that funding. Think about it. As David Adler writes on the Australian Jewish Association Facebook page, this is reprehensible. Australia is increasing the funding of hatred and terror incitement. And I quote, "Even as European countries are suspending and reviewing their funding, even as numerous reports expose the teaching of hatred, anti-Semitism, and glorification of terrorism in UNRWA's textbooks, Australia will double our grants to that organisation." And David Adler goes on, "The UN Relief and Works Agency is responsible, UNRWA is responsible for education and some other services to Palestinians. It does not solve refugee problems through resettlement, but perpetuates and magnifies problems. UNRWA, which allows Hamas paramilitary youth recruitment at its facilities," yes, you heard that correctly, allows paramilitary youth recruitment, "is part of the jihadist terrorist production system." Indeed, only 4 weeks ago, the EU blasted UNRWA's Commissioner General over anti-Semitic Palestinian textbooks. Can't Penny Wong read? Back in 2018, the EU also froze $17 million in funding over hate speech against Israel in school textbooks. But instead of paying heed to those warnings, Penny Wong released a mealy-mouthed statement saying, "In recognition of the vital work UNRWA undertakes, I am pleased to announce today that Australia plans to double our contribution to UNRWA this financial year from $10 to $20 million. Respect for all religions and people is important. The path to peace and stability requires efforts on all sides. We will continue to hold UNRWA accountable for its adherence to principles of tolerance, non-discrimination, equality, and neutrality." Yeah, right, Penny. That makes sense. Hold them accountable by giving them an extra $10 million. I have warned time and time again that modern Labour parties are no friend of Israel, and indeed the worst and most persistent anti-Semitism and Jew hatred today comes either from certain Islamic nations or from the left. Whether intentionally or unintentionally, Penny Wong's mealy-mouthed statement was released late on a Friday, directly before a Jewish holy long weekend, meaning it could receive little coverage in Jewish media. Deliberate? You tell me. But Labour's generosity with your money did receive plenty of coverage in the Arab media, all of it positive, of course. This Albanese Labour government is a radical, hard-left government that is implementing all its favourite programs with lightning speed, and nobody is doing anything about it. To pretend that UNRWA is some innocent or even worthy recipient of Australian taxpayers' money is obscene and sickening. Adler gives the example of Ella Mansour, an UNRWA teacher who on Facebook wrote, "By Allah, anyone who can kill and slaughter any Zionist and Israeli criminal and doesn't do so doesn't deserve to live. Kill them and pursue them everywhere. All Israel deserves is death." Yes, as David Adler points out, no need to worry what sort of education she is giving her students. Have a look at this Israeli video also on the AJA website, which shows Palestinian school kids boasting of being trained in jihad.
عشان اتدرب وحلم ان اكون مجاهد عشان نحرر ارضنا
وطبعا يعني عشان الاقصى ان شاء الله هنحررها بايدينا وبايدين مجاهدين القسام والمقاومه الفلسطينيه.
شاركت عشان اكون مجاهد وعشان نكون رجال. شاركت في المخيم عشان نبقى عندنا وجهيه كيف نحارب العدو الصهيوني، كيف نرجع ارض الاجداد، ارض فلسطين، ما نرضاش على ارض فلسطين انها تضلها مع اليهود.
لذلك لابد من تحصين هؤلاء النفوس وتقويه المعنويات بحيث يكونوا أقوياء في الدين، أقوياء في انتمائهم للوطن، أقوياء في انتمائهم أو بانتمائهم للجهاد.
This decision by the Labour government and Penny Wong is a total betrayal of every Jewish person in Australia. It is clear Labour would rather pander to the globalist elites than actually protect innocent Jewish lives. Penny Wong prattles on about being a supporter of a two-state solution, but how can there ever be two states when the Palestinian authorities are committed to sponsoring terror? Every Jew and every friend of the Jews in Israel should write to their MP and protest in the strongest possible language about this atrocity. And boy, do I get sick of saying this, where is Peter Dutton? Not a word, not a peep out of the opposition that I have heard on this matter. Peter Dutton was a member of the cabinet that took the correct and the only morally justifiable decision to cancel that aid originally. And yet total silence while that policy is reversed. Not good enough, I'm afraid. As for Labour and Penny Wong, they should hang their heads in perpetual shame.